Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. It was a brouhaha in the Bay Area last night. Wolves beat the Warriors in a chippy one. Let's talk about it on the Minnesota Basketball Party.
This is Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Timberwolves talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Basketball Party on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. Welcome in. It's the Minnesota Basketball Party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Wolves talk every Wednesday. I'm hosting the show, the pass first point guard, as they say. I'm Sam Ekstrom. I'm joined by Reggie Wilson, KARE 11 sports director and anchor, Jack Borman of Canis Hoopus, Ron Johnson, former NFL receiver, who's got a show here on the network as well, the Ron Johnson Show. Chris Carter on the show yesterday, and Ben Beacon, Locked On Wolves host. We're all here to talk about the surging Timberwolves, 7 in a row after last night's win against the Warriors, 104-101. An eventful victory, ejections, drama, sloppiness, craziness. Minnesota just keeps winning. We're going to dive into that. We've got some Anthony Edwards, Michael Jordan comparisons floating around. We'll get into that. We'll address that. We might debunk it, might agree with it. That'll come up a little later in the show. And where do the Wolves stand in the Western Conference through the first 10 games? They're half a game back of the 1 seed right now. So a juicy, meaty Minnesota Basketball Party today. Can't wait to get into it. But let's talk about last night's game. Ron Johnson, I'm going to go straight to you because we talked on your show yesterday. I set the over-under at 2.5 technicals. And before 2 minutes had been played, we had more than that. Draymond choking Rudy Gobert, McDaniels ejected, Klay ejected. What did you make of the skirmish to start things last night?
Well, I kind of called it. I mean, you know, we said on the show, I said over 2.5. I just felt like I didn't think it would go that far. Like, I just thought it would be chippy. I thought, you know, after Anthony Edwards' words to Draymond Green, I thought Draymond Green would be trying to prove a point. But then the minute Steph didn't play, and I tweeted this, I was like, Draymond probably was like, you know what? If Steph's not playing, none of us are going to play. And he just was like, all right, balls to the wall, and just ran after somebody. And he baby boyed that thing. I tweeted it. For those that don't remember the movie Baby Boy, Jody, who was Tyrese, got absolutely choked out by his mother's boyfriend, which is, I think, Ding Rames. And, that's what it looked like. It looked like he was telling Rudy Gobert, go cry to your mama, call for your mama, because that's the only person going to help you right now.
Jody.
It just felt like he didn't want to be in the game. And so, and again, that was like 2 minutes into the game, no score. The other thing with that tweet, though, Sam, I text you and Reggie about this. I was right. It's almost at 400,000 views, 183 reposts. 26 people bookmarked it. I don't know why. Maybe they're going to come back to this later when the fight happens again. Because I did tweet the response, which is from Ricky Bobby when the Frenchman broke Will Ferrell's arm and told him to say you love crepes. So I think that's Rudy Gobert's only comeback. You have to grab Draymond by the neck and say, if you don't say I love crepes, I'm going to choke you out. And that's the only recourse. But no, I mean, the Timberwolves showed that they could battle back from adversity after the scuffle. They were down and they still found a way to come back and win.
Ben Beacon, let's go to you. You giving out grades on this fight?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. I mean, like, here's the thing. Jaden and Klay Thompson are the ones that started it. And I was actually, I don't know, I wasn't surprised that they rejected. But it was like what they did was tame compared to what Draymond did, right? Like, I thought maybe they just get texts and they'd move on. But I guess it makes sense, you know, get the instigators out of the game right away. But in Jaden McDaniels' interview after the game in the locker room, he was just kind of he was Jaden McDaniels. He was matter of fact,
very calm. Yeah.
Yeah, like, hey, I'm not going to take anything from anyone. I don't, and you know, and he was asked. I think Marty Gellner asked him, like, hey, you know, what precipitated that? Like, were you guys talking? He goes, no, I don't know. He's like, I don't know him at all. I don't know. Like, it just kind of happened. I'm not going to back down, which is classic Jaden McDaniels. And I actually think that was kind of the theme of this game for the Wolves, because for 2.5 quarters, it felt like they were backing down. It felt like the classic lose to a bad team or lose to a good team, missing their 3 best players, like what happened last year far too frequently. But then all of a sudden, and we'll probably get into this, but third quarter, it was Cat, it was Shake Milton for a stretch there that just kind of pulled them out of a tailspin. And it was another ugly win. And we saw them win pretty ugly against the Spurs last Friday. And you have to win those games, right? Like, it's not always going to be dominant. It's not always going to be pretty. And given the way this thing started, it was so impressive to me that they pulled it together in the way that they did the last, call it, quarter and a half of this game. And they did it in a bunch of different ways. Everyone contributed. It was really kind of a refreshing win, as ugly as the game was. It wasn't basketball poetry by any means. But it was a good result, and it was a solid win.
Yeah, I thought that the Warriors actually came out of that skirmish with the home crowd momentum, kind of the us against them mentality, and they used that for 3 quarters to get a 7-point lead going into the fourth. I thought they had the energy in that game, and then in the fourth quarter, talent showed up. Cat, Ant, Conley. Like, that's where the Wolves really showed up. But Jack, back to this fight that kind of precipitated the whole thing. It's unbelievable how we're all in our own little world, and it's all relative, right? Because if you watch the Wolves broadcast like we did, you're getting one side of the story, which I think is the correct side of the story. But if you watch the Warriors broadcast, they would have you believe that Rudy Gobert committed a felony on Klay Thompson. And my theory is, based on his reaction time, Draymond Green was going to choke somebody. He was going to do a WWE move, whether Rudy Gobert was choking Klay Thompson or tying his shoe. Draymond was going to get in the middle of that thing and wreak havoc at any cost. And I think Charles Barkley, oddly, is the voice of reason here. If you watched Inside the NBA, he's the one saying, Rudy's not doing anything. And the NBA deemed that he was a peacemaker in this in their official report. I can't believe that there are multiple perspectives on this when it seemed fairly cut and dried to me.
Yeah, I just don't think you can use still shots when you've got the video right there, because I think the two things tell a wildly different story. Yeah, but I mean, you kind of have to trace back this Rudy Gobert Draymond Green beef a little bit, because if you remember when Draymond Green, was suspended indefinitely for knocking out his own teammate, Rudy Gobert tweeted that insecurity is always loud. And then when Rudy Gobert, threw a haymaker at Kyle Anderson, Draymond Green, of course, then tweeted, insecurity is always loud. And so, and then you think about what happened on Sunday with, Rudy Gobert was guarding Draymond Green, but was playing maybe 15 or 20 feet off of him, and then made life really difficult for him whenever he got in the paint. And you could just tell that Draymond wanted no part of Rudy Gobert on the interior of that defense. And Rudy Gobert was talking some trash to him in that game. And I think Draymond Green just saw an opportunity when, there was this scuffle and just kind of a free-for-all to just go after Rudy Gobert. I don't really think that Draymond was interested in standing up for Klay Thompson. I think that that's an easy cover for him to hide behind. But I think that this beef between Gobert and Draymond has been going on for a long time. And it was just an opportunistic, let me get my Twitter screenshots and let all the fans, talk about, Draymond, look at Draymond, getting after Root. Like, all it was an opportunity to go after a guy he really doesn't like.
Yeah, Reggie, let's get your thoughts on this too. What do you think?
Draymond is insane. Like, there's no other way to explain it. Like, the man is insane. Like, that was just unhinged rage out of nowhere. It's a 0-0 ball game, and he just comes flying in like a WWE character and just like goes full sleeper hold. And the discourse behind it is just, I think it kept me up. It immediately killed any productivity I had at work last night. It was like I was like minutes away from being on the desk, and I'm just like, okay, lock in. And I couldn't. Like, there was no way to like, just, people putting, like, when Cat was on the ground and he was getting choked out that time. And, some guy was like, man, like, Cat was in prime position for a lariat. He didn't take the opportunity. Like, the whole thing it was crazy. Like, I just couldn't believe what was going on as it was happening. And then after it happened, I'm just like, why did that happen? And I said this before we started. It just, to me, it kind of reeks of a team that knows that it's on the downturn of their dynasty, and they are still just fighting for it. Like, hey, you are going to respect us, and respect is wins and losses. The whole "what have you done for me lately?" And Klay Thompson, I wouldn't say he's fallen off a cliff per se, but he's definitely not the same Klay Thompson that we remember before, the 2 injuries that he had. And so, he's going down, trying to maybe punk Jaden McDaniels, and McDaniels is like, look, I punched the wall and broke my hand last year. I'm not afraid of anybody. If I'm not afraid of the wall, I'm not afraid of you. And so that was just a wrong decision. He ripped Klay's jersey up. And the funniest part was they gave Klay a clean new jersey, and then he got ejected.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, fine.
Extra laundry.
And so, like, I still just don't understand, like, that. And Draymond just wouldn't let him go. And, like, if you looked at, like, Casper, he was like, come on, man, don't do this. You don't have to do it. Come on, man. Just let him go. Come on, stop it, please. And so it was funny, like, looking at Krasinski's tweets after the game. He was saying that Gobert called Green's choke clown behavior, said he knew as soon as he heard Steph was out, Draymond was going to try to get ejected. Every time Steph doesn't play, he doesn't want to play without his guy Steph, so he does anything he can to get ejected. And, like, now, like, it happened, so, like, Dre has to live with that. Like, it's out there. Like, that was kind of like a mic drop type thing. And now, like, until Draymond maybe does his podcast or something like that to respond, like, it's out there. And that's just what the discourse is. And so that whole thing was just ridiculous. And I just, like I said, killed all of my productivity last night.
He's going to have plenty of podcast recording time the next 2 weeks. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's a multiple game suspension for sure. And that doesn't include the suspension that's going to inevitably be coming when he reaches the technical foul or the flagrant foul threshold for getting suspended as well. There's so much more to talk about with this Wolves team. So last night, we've addressed the fight. There was a lot more basketball that got played. We're also going to talk about their place in the West and Anthony Edwards' ascension. We're going to get into all of that after I tell you about eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft, scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your rosters. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. I'm gravitating toward Kyle Lowry. The Miami Heat, Kyle Lowry had minuscule usage to begin the season, but Tyler Hero is out. Lowry's got to step up, and he has. He'd be a really strong add for your team. Could also go with Keontae George. Jazz's new starting point guard tallied 20 assists in his first 2 starts. Very efficient. It might be rocky, but he's worth grabbing. Keontae George. And the Jazz, by the way, got a big win against Portland last night. They're 2-0 in the in-season tournament. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. At these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, back to Wolves Warriors, and we'll start with Ben Beacon this time. Cat, and this is the Cat game. It was Cat versus Brandon Podziemski. Anthony Edwards, I would say, struggled until the end, and he has this switch that he's able to flip. And he did, once again, in the fourth quarter. But I thought his decision-making was a little haphazard. Shots weren't falling, but Cat really kept the Wolves afloat. He puts up 33 and 11, hits the go-ahead shot late in the game, hit some massive shots late in the game, not just that one, but he's averaging now 26.5 and 10 in his last 4 games. I think the early season Cat struggles have gone by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns was fantastic in this game. Second quarter, he was really good too. Obviously, the fourth quarter was huge, but the Wolves were down 8 after the first. And we talked about momentum earlier. Like, there was a ton of momentum in the Chase Center that was, the Warriors were kind of feeding off of that. They were trying to muck the game up. They were succeeding. I think it was the second quarter when Nas got a technical and things kind of looked like they were teetering for the Wolves a little bit. And Towns was really good in the second quarter too. And then late in the game, in general, the Wolves were actually running. It was like after he hit his first, I think it was like a trail 3 or something in transition. And the Wolves just started calling plays that were running through Karl-Anthony Towns. And it's one of those things I've been saying, especially when Ant's off the floor, they need to do that more often. Just call actual play sets, run it through Cat. They did that. They got him another 3. He scored. I think he scored in the paint, and then he hit another 3 after that. And it was just kind of this where Chris Finch and Mike Conley realized, like, hey, we just got to keep rolling with Cat. If we need to go to the well with Anthony Edwards, if there's a clutch, close, late situation, we need to go ISO with Ant. That's always there. As long as Cat's rolling, let's get him the ball. Let's let him score efficiently. And that's exactly what happened in this game. And he was still active defensively, even when this game was like second, third quarter, when it was really ugly. I thought Cat was one of the few Wolves that seemed locked in on both ends, which is the weirdest thing, because usually Cat is the guy that has that stray voltage, as we talk about with Karl-Anthony Towns, where he's a little bit, he gets too emotional and he gets too wrapped up. And it felt like he was, weirdly enough, a calming presence in this game where he was locked in. He was going to make the right decisions. He had a couple of bad outlet passes, a couple of turnovers. The end of the third quarter when he was kind of shoved, I think it was Kuminga, and he threw the ball that led to the Pajeski 3 at the buzzer in the third quarter. So there were a couple of bad plays mixed in there. But without Karl-Anthony Towns, the Wolves probably lose this game by multiple possessions. I mean, he was genuinely good in this game. And we could go back the last 4 games now. I think this is 4 straight really solid games going back to, I guess it was, the New Orleans game last Wednesday, where he's played extremely, extremely well. And it's like we've said kind of all along. I mean, the Wolves could easily have a 1A and 1B. That, you don't have to have a Batman and a Robin. Karl-Anthony Towns is a more efficient scorer in general than Anthony Edwards. And when he's on, it makes sense to run the offense through him. You always have Ant to fall back on. And we'll talk about him later, but we saw Ant close the game out with a big assist, hit another big shot in the final minute. So that's always there when you need it. But, running what you can through Karl-Anthony Towns, especially when he's playing this well, is a really smart thing for the Wolves to be doing.
Ron Johnson, it's really turning into a 1A, 1B. And I know we think Ant is the alpha, and he probably is. But on nights when Ant doesn't have his A game and Karl-Anthony Towns can carry this team, which we've seen a couple times now, what a luxury for this Timberwolves team. And Cat has absolutely stepped up this last week.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Cat, and we talked about this, the lack of whining, the lack of crying for fouls. I forgot which one, but he kind of went up for like a up and under layup. He kind of got bumped. So depending on the ref, he might have got the call, depending on the night, depending on I think in that moment, a lot of the things down the stretch, after the first fight, the refs are going to let stuff go. But to see Cat just lay it up, get knocked down, fall to the ground, jump up and run down the court, it's a sign of maturity. Now, in that moment, I don't know if that was more of like, hey, I know I can't say anything else to these refs tonight because they're already pissed off for what happened to start the game. Everybody be on your P's and Q's, but they have 11 rebounds, 33 points. You look at Ant with the 20. It's definitely a 1A, 1B. And I said this before, like they have to feel the game out. Like I don't think either of them should go into the game saying tonight's my night. I think they should go into the game saying whoever's hot, we're going to keep it going. And that's what I liked about this team. Also, in the first half, it kind of pissed me off a little bit because they were down in the rebound. When you think about they lost Draymond Green and you're still losing in the rebounds, it was shocking to me. I think it was like 23-14 when I first checked in the first half. And then, they kind of got it back together, which means they won the rebound battle in the second half, which is probably one of the main reasons they won, with second chance opportunities and then limiting the Warriors' second chance opportunities. But that's where Cat has to be. He has to continue to be that dominant force, that guy that if Rudy Gobert's not getting 21 rebounds, he's like, look, I'll go get 10. He's a double-double every night guy. And if he can do that, this team, I mean, I said this, like they are now in the top 4 seed conversation because of when you look at the rest of the West and what everybody else is doing there that we assumed would be ahead of them. Nobody else, the Suns, the Lakers, the Grizzlies, the Kings, nobody else has really shown yet in the first 10 games that they're going to be better than the Wolves down the stretch.
And Reggie, this is kind of what the Wolves were missing last year for 50 games with Cat. Like, this is why they were a 500 team, because Ant couldn't win it for them every single night. He needed a wingman, and Cat is that right now. Through the first 10 games, they've kind of taken turns being that top dog, and last night it was Cat's turn.
That's the Cat I want to see all the time, man. Like, it's funny because, you know, whenever a big man is struggling and they go to Shaq on the NBA, on TNT, he's like, you want to see the big man dominate? Go out there and dominate. Every time. And like, that was Cat's version of dominating. I loved what I saw from Cat on many occasions. Like, you know, you get matched up against Jonathan Kuminga in the paint, and another Shaqism. That's barbecue chicken all day. Go at him. And he did. And he got the bucket. And I just want to continue to see him just be deliberate out there, pick his shots, pick his spots, take his shots. You know, that he's in the fourth quarter, you know, crossing over, hitting step back jumpers. Like, of course he thinks he's a guard. Like, you know, that's not always going to be something that people want to see, but obviously that's what he feels comfortable doing. That's a part of his game. You know, the deliberate nature of him catching the ball and then just like pulling up from three. Like, they don't win that game without Cat being as aggressive as he was yesterday. And I'm with you, Ron. Like, just hoop. Like, don't go down the floor. That was a foul. You know, just, you know, whining about fouls and you know, things that just don't really matter in the grand scheme of things because they didn't call XYZ. And so I just want to continue to see that type of output from Cat, because if he continues to be that, you know, there was a report from Wendy from ESPN on Sunday that they were like, he was like, I'm not sure the Wolves could even get picks for Cat right now because of how he was playing. And I don't know, if I see that and I'm Cat, like, I take that personally. Like, he was considered, you know, one of the rising big men in the league, you know, years ago, like a guy that was going to be, you know, kind of how they talk about Embiid at this point right now. Like, this is his chance to kind of go in and take the reins back and be the type of dominant player that we all think that he can be. And last night was just kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't say the start of it, because like, he has been a consistent, you know, 25 and 10 type of a guy, you know, moving forward, but like 33 and 11, like, give me that every game. Like, do that.
And the one thing I'll say is, Sam, one thing I'll say, Reggie, you're dead on about Cat understanding the mismatch and going now, like not waiting. I watched way too much basketball yesterday. My wife was gone, so I got to just sit in my office after I put the kids to bed. I watched Michigan State and Duke. I watched Kansas, Kentucky. I even watched the 76ers, or not 76ers, the Clippers versus the Nuggets. And when you watch all three of those games, the big factor was Hunter Dickinson for Kansas. I don't know if you guys have seen him. He played at Michigan for 3 years. Now he's transferring because of the portal. And he was three-time Big Ten player, all Big Ten player. And now he's at Kansas, the number one team in the country. But he's big.
Off last night.
He went off. Kentucky was missing 3 7-footers. And so every time Hunter Dickinson got the ball in the paint, it was like little brother. Like, all right, let me just lay this up with my left and turn around. What? Okay, you're back on me again. And then when you watch Jokic, same thing. The minute the Clippers went small, Jokic attacked. He just started attacking and attacking it, and the Clippers could not figure out how to get the ball out of his hands. And the minute they triple teamed him, because they did, then you see Aaron Gordon wide open. So that's what Karl-Anthony Towns has to do. He has to realize the minute I have a mismatch, just go now. Don't worry about all the BS. Don't try to be the best big man shooter. Just go, and you will be a force to be reckoned with.
Jack, put a bow on this Cat conversation. You know what I really liked, just to add to it? I liked the 11 of the 33 and 11. I thought that he was rebounding ferociously last night. On a night where Rudy couldn't hang on to the ball, I thought Cat said, hey, get out the way. I'll be the 5. I'll get the rebounds at the rim. And he was fantastic clearing the glass when the Warriors were getting a lot of offensive rebounds too. I loved Cat's aggressiveness on the boards. But what did you think of his night and his week?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Cat this week, the last 4 games for Cat, he's averaging 26.5 points on 55% shooting, 52% from 3 and 92% from the free throw line. It's pretty damn good for a guy that apparently isn't going to, or wouldn't fetch any picks if the Timberwolves tried to trade him today. But Karl-Anthony Towns' fourth quarter, I thought, was one of the best quarters we've seen from him in a long time, just in terms of the timely playmaking, right? Cat had 5 either made shots or assists that tied the game or gave the Timberwolves a lead in the fourth quarter alone, which was pretty important. 3 of those were 3-point shots. He had another step back 2 to take the lead, and then had an awesome pass to a backdoor cutting Nickeil Alexander-Walker to retake a lead as well. It just felt like every single time the Wolves needed something, they went to Cat. And like Ron said, it feels like the correlation between how quickly Karl-Anthony Towns makes his move, whether it's, catching and shooting or driving or making a move in the post. It feels like it's damn near one. The faster he goes, the better he scores, the more efficient he is with whatever he does. And then too, I thought the whining was a big thing too. And the biggest thing I think there is like, well, if you can sense that, to what Ron said, you need to be on your P's and Q's in a game like this. Like, how do you not recognize that every single night? And so obviously you give him credit, you pat him on the back for doing that really, really well at a time when his team really, really needed it from him. But again, like, this has to be the standard for him. Obviously not averaging or not scoring 33 and 11, but just going quickly and not complaining and getting up and sprinting back down the floor if you miss a shot or your call doesn't go your way. And he didn't let that discourage him last night. And hopefully that's what we continue to see from him, because that's what we got down the stretch of last season after he returned from injury. And it really helped the Timberwolves team, kind of punch above their weight in the playoffs last season. So hopefully we can see more of that down the stretch of the regular season here.
We're going to hear from another one of our partners. Then we're going to get back and say where the Wolves rank in the West. And also Anthony Edwards meriting MJ comparisons. That's all coming up on the Minnesota Basketball Party. But first, a word from Ibotta. How does free Thanksgiving sound? Well, this year, Ibotta is here to give you cash back and help make sure your Thanksgiving table is complete, because who wants turkey without the gravy? Starting November 1st for the 4th year in a row, Ibotta is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Just add the offers in the app to redeem for everything you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers and upload your receipt. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can also earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. A lot of good holiday season stores there. Download the Ibotta app now and use code LOCKED to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKED. All right, Reggie Wilson. Where do the Wolves rank in the West? Now, they're second. They're second in the standings, half a game back of Denver. But what is their power ranking right now in the Western Conference? 1, 2, 3, 4? What do you have?
I put them at 2, because Denver is still the champ. So I give Denver the edge there. And Denver won again last night. So it was so quick. It was so funny because Krasinski tweeted out that the Wolves were top in the Western Conference standings. And then like 2 minutes later, everybody was just like, shut up, dude. It was only for a couple minutes because the Nuggets won, and it was like, okay, they took their top spot back. But honestly, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens tonight. Second game of a back-to-back after just an absolute dogfight, literally and figuratively, last night. And it was interesting because there were times yesterday where it seemed like the Warriors couldn't miss, and the Wolves they couldn't get with them. And I think tonight is going to be the first time that we see the Suns' big three in action all at once. And so that's going to be an interesting situation. seeing how they match up with KD, Bill, and Book. And so I think after tonight, if you ask me that question, I may be more apt to give them the top spot as opposed to the number 2 spot, depending on what happens tonight. But that is a tough matchup, though, in the second game of a back-to-back. So it's kind of hard for me to just say, like, oh, if they win this, like, they're for real, because, they could easily lose this one because of the circumstances and the situation that they're in. But I'm interested to see how this plays out, because the Wolves have just been playing some really good basketball, and you've just been waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it hasn't yet. And they've shown in so many different ways that they can win despite, this happening, that happening. Yesterday, the Warriors tried to take them off their game from the very start, and they battled back to win. A lot of people are like, look, they're not the same Wolves, and they kind of seem like it right now, even though it's early.
Yeah, I almost feel like the Wolves are kind of due to play like a cleaner game than they did last night, just because so much went wrong last night. There was sloppiness. Like for 2 good quarters of that game, and they still found a way to win. I mean, if the shots fall tonight, they could definitely beat Phoenix. But I'm trying to bait somebody, Jack, into saying the Wolves are number 1 in the West definitively, and I'm just going to present it with no additional commentary. They've got the best point differential. Best point differential in the West. They've beaten Denver. They've got a better road record than Denver. What's holding you back, Jack, from saying they're number 1?
Nothing. I'm more, I respect Reg for, the champ talk, but I'm more of a what have you done for me lately guy. Especially considering that Denver lost 2 really important pieces of the rotation from last year. And Jamal Murray is out for another month at least another month with a hamstring issue. I think this Timberwolves team is the deepest team in the Western Conference. And I think that matters a ton, especially when you're playing on the second night of a back-to-back against a team like, Phoenix that has 3 really, really, high octane scorers. They just have a lot of really, really solid defenders. And that's exactly what you need when you're going against a team like that. And, I think when you look at the rest of the Western Conference and you look at how Dallas has started, Dallas has started really well and Luka's playing out of his mind, but their schedule has been, Gerber baby soft. And you look at some of these other teams, I think the Clippers are 0-6 now since they've made the trade for
hilarious
for Harden. You look at the Grizzlies are just struggling profusely without Ja Morant. And you look at the Lakers, a team like that, and who knows how long they're going to stay healthy for. And that team is pretty top heavy, and they've got a lot of pretty solid players, but I just don't know how many of them you can count on from night to night, especially how many new guys there are in that rotation. The Pelicans are really in a tough place, especially with Zion pretty much admitting that he's struggling to buy in. So it's just hard for me to look around the Western Conference and find a team that really should strike the fear in the hearts of the Timberwolves, especially considering that everyone would probably say the Nuggets are the number 1 team. But I mean, I feel really confident that if those 2 teams played a 7-game series today, if Jamal Murray was fully healthy, both these teams are fully healthy, they played a 7-game series tomorrow or whatever, that the Timberwolves would win that series. So it's hard for me to say anything but one. I mean, before the season, I said, on this show, Timberwolves are going to go 52-30 and be second in the West, and they're well on their way. And it's just hard for me to move off of that right now.
Yeah. Hard to find a better resume, Ben, than the Wolves have put together through 10 games.
Yeah, I agree with Jack. And the resume is a great point. I mean, you listed a lot of it, Sam, in terms of point differential, 3rd in the NBA, best in the Western Conference. They've beaten 2 of the other top 4 point differential teams in Boston and Denver, and they get a crack at Philadelphia here soon. And winning on the road twice in Golden State, obviously one of those games, a full-strength Warriors team, and an impressive win. And then the second game, overcoming adversity in a game they should have won. It was closer than it should have been. But, as we talked about, it was still an impressive win. So, yeah. And to Jack's point also, like, who else in the West are you taking besides Denver? Like, at worst, they're clearly the second best team in the Western Conference. Dallas's point differential is not impressive given the schedule, as Jack mentioned. Teams with upside that you worry about, we're still only 10%, 10 games into the season, more than 10%, I guess. And you've got like OKC, I guess, would have the upside that that you wonder what could that turn into over the course of the season. I don't think Houston is necessarily a top 4 team in the West when it's all said and done. So, there's the Pelicans have some upside if they get some things figured out. Obviously, Phoenix does, being as deep as they are, or excuse me, not as deep as they are, being as top heavy as they are now that they're allegedly going to get healthy, whatever that means. Like, they're probably going to end up being a top 4 team in the West. But Minnesota's so deep. They've beaten the teams that you need to beat to this point in the season. They've had the league's toughest schedule through 10 games, and they've come out of it 8-2 with the third best point differential in the league. And the defense is legit. I know we've talked about that, but like the next best defensive rating is like 5 points per 100 possessions worse than Minnesota's mark. I talked about on Tuesday's Locked On Wolves about the half-court defense specifically, and it's like significantly better than the top 3 teams from last year in terms of full season half-court defense. Transition defense is the only thing that's pulling that down only a little. It's still pretty decent. Their transition defense has been much better than last year. And defense travels, right? Like, they've only had one bad defensive game all year. They've held 8 of their 10 games. They've held the opponent below at 42% shooting or below. You're going to win a lot of games if you do that defensively. And I think, well, there's some variance in allowing a high 3-point shooting or a low 3-point shooting percentage from opponents. If you funnel them to taking bad shots, difficult shots, we saw early in the game on Tuesday night against the Warriors, Golden State was making some really tough threes. The Corey Joseph bank from the right side of the floor, the Pajewski 3 at the end of the third quarter. There were a bunch of just like ridiculous makes. That stuff isn't consistently going to happen, and that was almost like trying to pull things back to the mean, right? In terms of how poor opponents have shot the ball against the Wolves from deep. So all that stuff is going to travel for the Wolves. They're going to be favored in a ton of games moving forward. We'll talk about their upcoming schedule. This team's legit good, and you'd be crazy if you didn't think they were at least the top 2 team in the West.
Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I got to say top 2 as well. This is the thing. Again, watching the Nuggets last night versus the Clippers, the one thing that I noticed, and this is what's going to be the big factor for the Wolves, can they match up with Jokic, Aaron Gordon, and then you look at, because we're not even talking about Murray. Murray didn't even play. And what's his name? Michael Carter Jr. When you think, or Porter Jr., whichever one it is. When you think about how they spread the floor out and they allow Jokic to create, then they get it down to him, and he's like, once he realizes he's got the wrong guy on him, he's pretty quick. I think at one point he even had Kawhi on him, and it was like a baby, and Kawhi is one of the best, defenders in the league, and he kind of just turned over and shot it like a dad would do a son. And so when I think about that and I look at the Wolves, I think Anthony Edwards on that team is unguardable. I think Karl-Anthony Towns and Jokic spreading the floor out, like, he can put Jokic in bad situations, but I'm guessing it would be Aaron Gordon on him, Jokic on Gobert. But then you have the Naz Reid, you have the Jade McDaniels. I just feel like the Wolves bench and role players even are starting to figure it out. I look at Bobby Schmurder for the Nuggets, and then you think about, which is Reggie Jackson, when you think about him versus even Michael Conley. I think Conley allows the floor to be spread out. When you watch the spacing of the Wolves, the last couple of games has been extremely good. So I'm going to say 1 or 2. I'm not afraid to say they right now, to me, have a little bit of edge of that first, just right now. I'm going to go a little bit. If Rudy Gobert is getting 20 rebounds a game, or sorry, he can get 20 rebounds against the Nuggets, because that's where the Nuggets absolutely hurt the Clippers, was the rebounds, the second chance points. Just like slapping the ball out, just getting a hand on the ball. If the Wolves can box out and get the ball, I feel like the Wolves can beat them. And so that's why I would say the Wolves have a chance to be the number 1 power ranking team.
Hey, put some respect on Boston College legend Reggie Jackson there. Come on.
He just looks like Bobby Schmurder though. Like, every time I see him, I feel like he wants to do the dance. Like, but no, he looked good last night too. Like, he looked fast, he looked quick, he made quick decisions, but look who he's playing with. Like, how can you make a bad decision when if I just kind of throw it up near Jokic, his big frame and hands are going to catch it, and then he's smart with the ball. He travels too, by the way. Like, he shuffles his feet a lot before he gets started, and the refs let it go. Also saw Paul George travel last night, and they let it go. He took 3 steps clearly, and they let it go. So the NBA refs also are a part of this drama script, because if they call the travel on both of them, I think the Clippers end up winning that game, and they don't get a chance for a second chance shot. They'd have been down 5 with, like, I forgot how many seconds were left, but they let Jokic play through it. And I'm like, come on now. Y'all got to stop this.
Paul George is going to want to travel out of LA pretty soon. The way things are going with Harden,
Harden is a system, though. Harden is a system. He's not in a system. He is the system.
He is the system.
So they got to figure that out too. But
system of dysfunction.
And they are. It's too many guys, not enough balls. Russell Westbrook's taking threes. Like it's not a recipe for
it's not a good
success.
mix. No, it's not. I want 20 seconds on this. If you go over, it's okay. I'll forgive you. I won't buzz you. Wolves go 8-2 in the first 10 games. What are they going to go in the next 10? I'll read it off for you really quickly. And we don't actually know the 10th opponent because the 10th opponent is going to be the quarterfinal of the in-season tournament, assuming they're in it. So it's Suns, Pelicans, Knicks, 76ers at home, big one, Kings in-season tournament, Grizzlies, Thunder, Jazz, Hornets, and then to be determined. What do we think about the next 10? Reggie, give it to me.
I go 7-3. How about that?
Nice. So a 15-5 start. That would be pretty good. Jack.
Yeah.
I was also going to say 7-3. I think that, when they have to play some tough Eastern Conference teams in the Knicks and the 76ers, I think they'll drop one of those games and, probably have one game where we maybe don't expect them to lose that they end up losing because some guy's resting or whatever happens.
Ben.
I had actually written down 7-3, but I'll err on the side of 6-4 just to be different. I agree with what those guys said. I mean, I think some of those like Knicks, Sixers, Thunder, and then 2 games against the Pelicans. I guess that second Pelicans game is going to come after the in-season tournament. But at some point, like if Zion gets things going, I mean, it's a tough schedule. The one thing they do have going in their favor, in their favor is that they don't play any back-to-backs other than tonight against Phoenix. Still weird that they're going to get to basically like the week of Christmas or the week before Christmas with only playing one back-to-back the first 2 months of the season. So that will definitely help. So I'll say 6-4, but 7-3 is a real possibility.
Ron.
I had them at 7-2 going into that semifinal game. So I feel like they can win that. I'm going to say 8-2. Like, I feel like the Knicks and 76ers are the toughest. The Suns, who knows what their load management is going to look like against the Wolves. They are going to be at home, so there's no travel. Who knows? A Kardashian might show up and Devin Booker might not want to play. So there's a lot going on there. I look at the rest, though, like the Grizzlies don't have Ja. You could tell how bad they are. The Kings haven't really figured it out. Their coach is cussing everybody out. The Thunder, Gilchrist has not really got it going yet. And the Jazz just don't show that they have it. And the Hornets, I mean, come on now. Like, ever since PJ Washington got Brittany Renner pregnant, the Hornets have not been a good team. Like, they've been like up and down, and it has not clicked. So I have to go with 8-2. I think they can win that semifinal.
I love how the celebrity drama influences the outcome. This is the behind the scenes stuff that you don't get anywhere else.
Hey.
Just for the record, Ron and Jack, we made predictions last week on how the Wolves would fare in their 4 tough games. These were the results. No one got 4-0. No one went that far, but Ron and Jack, you said 3-1. Reggie and I went 2-2, and the Wolves shut us all up. They proved us all wrong. So we'll see how they do in the next 10. And then we'll flash that graphic back in 10 days. We've got about 4 minutes left on the Minnesota basketball party. I want to spend it talking about the latest report, an anonymous NBA scout saying that Anthony Edwards is, quote, the next Michael Jordan. So, Jack, ridiculous, semi-ridiculous, not ridiculous?
I don't think it's ridiculous in the sense that I think he's just a really tough player to find player comparisons for, right? I mean, Chris Finch was asked by, somebody, I think it was before the Jazz game, of like, what is the most, who are the first few players that come to mind when you think of player counts for Ant? And he said, Michael Jordan and Kobe. Do I need to continue? Was like a direct quote of what he said. I mean, it's just from the charisma, from the intensity, the aggression, the way that he scores, his just his personality, his fire, everything about him. It's hard to kind of push back against that and say, let's pump the brakes, because, we haven't had, any player or person that kind of checks all those boxes like Anthony Edwards does. And it's just a really cool thing that Timberwolves fans are going to have him here for, at minimum, the rest of the decade.
Ben?
Yeah, I don't think it's ridiculous. I honestly think his ceiling is in that neighborhood. Like we can have that real discussion. The major difference at this stage is that MJ was a superstar immediately. He was an all-star in his first season. He was dominant, to this point. Year 4 for MJ was probably about when he became like a super duper star. Like, hey, this guy's clearly the best player in the league. He's generational. And this is year 4 for Ant. So he may be making the leap that MJ kind of started with. Now, of course, MJ was a few years older than Ant, right? So there's, I guess, similarity there in terms of actual age, not years in the league. But if this is the year if Ant goes from borderline star, all-star for the first time last year to an all-NBA player this year, that trajectory, it's not insane. It's obviously like it's a crazy claim that we've seen before, but this is kind of the first time since LeBron, I think people have like seriously started throwing that out there. And obviously a very different player than LeBron too, but that was kind of the last time I remember when people, tried to make that comparison. And we've got a body of work now. We've got a trajectory of improvement for Ant. And again, as long as it continues starting this year and he goes from star to superstar to, all NBA super duper star, like it's not. Also, by the way, the silence, like there aren't very many people out there that are like refuting that and saying, oh, that's ridiculous, because nobody really knows. Like anything could happen here. The ceiling is ridiculous for Ant. And I think Chris Finch, answered that question in the right way for sure.
Ron.
Yeah, I think it's a little ridiculous. This is the only reason why. It's Michael Jordan. It's like, come on now. Like we got to pump the brakes a little bit, but I do understand like trying to find a comparison because between Kobe and Mike, then you have LeBron. And so you can't put Anthony Edwards with LeBron because they're just different type of players. And so from the height, the ability, the pogo stick jumps, I see the thought behind it because they're trying to find like who does he remind you of? So I get that, like from a body type, his charisma. Yeah, he kind of reminds you of it, but come on, I just can't. I can't do it for the simple fact of that the man hasn't played basketball in I don't know how many years, and I still have a pair of Jordans I just bought, and they're sitting on my shelf in my office. Like that's what Michael Jordan does. And so I think Anthony Edwards has a long way to go, but I do understand it. I would be more okay with the Kobe comparison than the Jordan comparison because I wouldn't even put Kobe on the same level as Jordan. I just think Jordan was just a different type of beast. Now, defenses back then, we can discuss that all day because I do agree some of the defenses back then were tough, but some just were like some of these dudes looked like they should have been lawyers other than point guards, and they were trying to guard Michael Jordan. And so it just was a different athlete back then as well. But yeah, no, it's a little bit ridiculous just because it is Michael Jordan, but I do understand the comparison.
1 minute left. Reggie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would, as Ron said, I think I would go more Kobe than Jordan just because you kind of look at the efficiency. And also, it's just kind of hard to place a Michael Jordan player in today's NBA because guys are so skilled and guys are so, I don't know, like there's shot makers that are in the league right now that is just kind of crazy. And like Mike was just kind of a one of one when he was in the league. And so, I don't know. I think I would like to see Ant be a little bit more efficient as a scorer before I kind of crown him, as Michael Jordan-esque. But yeah, I think his game does kind of remind me of a Kobe, a bit because like he has the bounce, he can pull up on you. He's got some range as well. I think as his game continues to grow, he will continue to be in that top 10 type conversation. But if he becomes more efficient, I could see top 5 type conversation.
Really tough for Ant to match MJ's production. MJ was averaging 37 and 35 points a game in his 3rd and 4th years in the league in an era where teams average like 90. Like his offensive numbers were ridiculous. One area though where they could be similar, MJ's success didn't translate to team success. Like they didn't win a playoff series with MJ until year 4. And that could be what the Wolves have with Ant, with his success finally translating into sort of the team concept. Great show. A lot of meat on the bone with this Wolves team. Glad you join us every Wednesday for Wolves Talk. Check out the 24/7 YouTube live stream as well. You can catch this show and other shows around the Locked On Sports Minnesota network. For Reggie Wilson, Jack Borman, Ron Johnson, Ben Beacon, I'm Sam Ekstrom. Tune into tonight's postcast after Wolves Suns. Jack and I will be rapping about the Wolves tonight after hopefully win number 8 in a row. Talk to you next Wednesday on the Minnesota Basketball Party.